I never thought I'd destroy my own family, but I did. And the worst part? I don't even know if I regret it. Some mistakes leave a stain so deep, you can't wash them away. You carry them. You live with them. And no matter how much time passes, they cling to you like a shadow. I know what you're thinking. That I'm a monster. That there's no excuse for what I did. Maybe you're right. Maybe I deserve every bit of the disgust, the shame, the judgment. But if you think you already understand this story, you don't. This is not a story about love. It's not even about lust. It's about loneliness. Silence. And the kind of darkness that doesn't just creep in overnight, it grows inside you for years, waiting for the right moment to take over. I thought I had everything under control. A husband. A son. A home. A life that, from the outside, looked ordinary. But inside? Inside, I was starving for something I couldn't name. And when I finally reached for it, I crossed a line no one should ever cross. And now? Now, I'm left with nothing but the wreckage. Before we begin, I want to warn you. This story contains mature themes. It deals with the challenges of betrayal, guilt, and consequences that cannot be undone. If these topics make you uncomfortable, you might want to stop listening now. But if you stay, I promise you, this story will make you think. It will make you question everything you believe about right and wrong. About love and destruction. About how thin the line really is between a mistake and something much worse. I'm Danielle McLean. I'm 38 years old. A wife. A mother. A woman who was supposed to know better. Mitchell McLean and I have been married for 19 years. He was everything I thought I needed, steady, reliable, the kind of man who never forgets to pay the bills, who fixes things around the house without being asked, who makes sure the car has gas before I ever realize it's low. He's good. A good man. A good father. And yet, I can't remember the last time we really talked. Not about schedules, or groceries, or whose turn it was to take out the trash. But about us. About what we wanted. What we needed. Somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other. Stopped touching. Stopped trying. Maybe it happened so slowly we didn't notice. Or maybe we did, but we just didn't care enough to fix it. He works long hours. Comes home late. Eats dinner in silence. Watches TV until he falls asleep on the couch. I stopped waiting up for him years ago. I go to bed alone, even when he's lying right next to me. And then there's Dior. Our son. Our only child. 18 years old. Smart. Thoughtful. Always in his own head, always observing, always thinking. He has his father's quietness but none of his distance. With me, he talks. Tells me things. Shares pieces of himself in a way that Mitchell never did. In a way I never expected. He was the one constant in my life that still felt real. The one person who still saw me. Who still made me feel like I mattered. Maybe that should have been enough. Our life looked normal from the outside. Family dinners at the dining table. Vacations once a year. Movie nights with popcorn and blankets on the couch. But if you knew where to look, you'd see the cracks. The way Mitchell barely looked at me anymore. The way I barely even tried to make him. The way I poured every ounce of attention, every piece of myself, into Dior instead. At first, it wasn't something I thought about. It wasn't something I questioned. He was my son. He was growing up, needing me less and less, and I just wanted to hold on a little longer before he pulled away completely. That's what mothers do. Right? But then, something changed. And I don't know if it was him or me. Maybe both of us. Maybe neither. But one day, I woke up and realized I wasn't just holding on to my son as a mother. I was clinging to him as a woman starved for connection. For something more than routine. For something I couldn't admit to myself, even when it was already happening. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was something far worse. There are moments in life when you realize you're missing something. You don't always know what it is at first. It sneaks up on you, little by little, until one day, it's all you can think about. That hunger. That emptiness. That aching need to be seen, to be wanted, to feel something real. For me, it started with a conversation. Just a simple talk. A night like any other. Dior had come to me with a question about relationships. About love. About intimacy. He was at that age where the world was opening up to him in ways he didn't fully understand yet. He trusted me. He wanted my advice. So, we talked. I told myself it was normal, that parents should be open about these things. That honesty is better than silence. But somewhere in that conversation, something changed. Not in him. In me. I was engaged. Interested. Hanging on to his words in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. It wasn't the subject itself, it was the connection. The closeness. The feeling of being needed. I felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. And it scared me. I should have stopped there. Maybe if I had, things would have turned out differently. But I didn't. I let those talks become our thing. Our late-night routine. After Mitchell went to bed, Dior and I would sit together, talking for hours. He would tell me about school, about girls he liked, about the things he struggled with. And I listened. Really listened. Not just as his mother, but as someone who understood what it felt like to be lost. To crave something more. The more we talked, the more I remembered things I had buried. Memories I had locked away. My own childhood. The blurred lines. How my siblings and I once explored together. How we did things to ourselves. Our bodies. The things I told myself were normal but never really were. It all came rushing back. Like a door I had kept shut for years had suddenly swung open. At first, I tried to ignore it. I kept telling myself I was being dramatic. That there was nothing wrong with a mother and son being close. That it was good he felt comfortable talking to me. But deep down, I knew. I knew I was holding on to something I shouldn't. And then, the little things started happening. Things that should have sent alarm bells ringing, but I silenced them instead. A hug that lasted too long. The way our legs would touch when we sat too close. The way my heart would race when he'd lean into me, whispering something he didn't want his father to hear. I started dressing differently at home, not for Mitchell, but for reasons I didn't want to admit. I started feeling jealous when Dior talked about other girls, as if their attention would pull him away from me. It was irrational. It was wrong. But I let those feelings fester. Mitchell, of course, noticed nothing. He was too buried in work, too exhausted to question anything. He trusted me. He trusted us. And maybe that was the biggest mistake of all. Denial is a strange thing. It lets you live in a world of your own making, convincing yourself that what you're doing isn't wrong. That it's different. That no one is getting hurt. But the truth has a way of forcing its way in, whether you're ready for it or not. And when it does, it doesn't whisper. It crashes through your life like a storm. That night, everything fell apart. Mitchell wasn't supposed to be home. He had told me he'd be working late, like he always did. I didn't even hear the front door open. I had no idea he was standing there until I saw him. Until I saw the look on his face. I will never forget that look. Not for as long as I live. It was a look of realization. Of betrayal. Of a man seeing something he couldn't unsee. I don't know how long he had been standing there. A few seconds? A minute? It didn't matter. It was long enough. The silence in that moment was unbearable. Heavy. Crushing. My body went cold, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind raced, searching for something to say, some way to undo what had just happened. But there was nothing. No words could fix this. No explanation could erase what he had seen. Then, the silence broke. A sound I had never heard before, Mitchell's voice, raw with rage, with disbelief. A sound that shattered everything. He wasn't asking questions. He wasn't waiting for an answer. He was just breaking. Right there in front of me. Dior didn't wait. He ran. Straight to his room, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, frozen, as Mitchell turned to me. His face was twisted in something between fury and heartbreak. And then he was gone. Out the front door. Just like that. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I backed into the bathroom and locked the door, as if that could somehow keep the truth from swallowing me whole. And then I just stood there, staring at my own reflection. I looked at myself, really looked at myself, for the first time in a long time. And I hated what I saw. The house felt different after that. Like the walls weren't holding up anymore. Like the air itself had changed. I kept waiting for Mitchell to come back, for him to demand answers, for him to scream, to cry, to do something. But he didn't. Hours passed. Then a whole night. Then a whole day. He was gone. And I had no idea if he was ever coming back. The first night after Mitchell left, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of his keys in the door. Waiting for the moment he'd come storming back in, demanding answers. Yelling. Crying. Something. But he never did. The second night was worse. The silence in the house was suffocating. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a call, a text, anything. I sent message after message. At first, I apologized. Then, I begged. Then, I just asked him to say something. To tell me he was safe. To tell me if he was ever coming back. Nothing. Just an empty inbox and the crushing realization that he was gone. Dior stopped talking, too. He stayed in his room, barely coming out to eat. When I tried to reach him, he flinched, like my voice physically hurt him. I told him everything would be okay, but the words felt hollow. I didn't even believe them myself. I didn't leave the house. I didn't eat. I barely even moved. I just sat by the phone, replaying that night in my head over and over again. I wanted to take it back. I wanted to undo it. But there are some things you can't undo. On the fifth day, I called Mitchell over 100 times. Straight to voicemail every time. He had blocked me. The man I had built a life with, the father of my child, had shut me out completely. By the seventh day, I was desperate. When my phone finally rang, I nearly dropped it. It was him. I answered before the first ring had finished. Mitchell, please, just talk to me. His voice was cold. Distant. Lunch. Tomorrow. 1 o'clock. We need to talk. And then the line went dead. I got there early. Too early. I sat at the cafe, hands wrapped around a coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink, stomach twisting in knots. The door opened, and my heart nearly stopped. Mitchell walked in, but he wasn't the same man who had left a week ago. He looked empty. Pale. Eyes sunken, face unreadable. He didn't look at me as he sat down. Just picked up the menu like we were strangers meeting for the first time. Mitchell, please, just talk to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look up. Just flipped the menu page, slow and deliberate. What is there to say? I know you're angry. I know you hate me. But I need to explain. His hand slammed down on the table, making me jump. No, Danielle. You don't get to explain. You don't get to make excuses. I saw what I saw. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. My heart pounded. I had pictured this conversation 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared me for the way he was looking at me now, like I was nothing to him. Then, he exhaled sharply and leaned back in his chair. And just when I thought the silence couldn't get any heavier, he spoke again. "I've been cheating on you, too." It took a second for the words to register. For the weight of them to sink in. My breath caught in my throat. "What?" My voice was barely there. "Bethany Vincent. She works with me." "It started months ago," he said, voice flat. "I was going to leave you. I was going to tell you. But now? After what I saw. We're beyond repair." My body went numb. My mind raced, trying to process. Trying to make sense of it. The betrayal. The hypocrisy. The realization that while I was destroying our marriage in one way, he had been doing the same in another. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What could I even say? That I was hurt? That I was angry? That I felt betrayed? I had lost the right to feel any of those things. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to say. Mitchell didn't say much after that. He didn't need to. We both knew there was nothing left to salvage. When he finally spoke again, his voice was emotionless, like he had already made peace with the end. "I'm filing for divorce," he said, stirring his coffee as if we were discussing something as mundane as the weather. "It's over, Danielle." I nodded because I knew he was right. There was no argument to be made, no reason to fight for something that had already burned to the ground. We had both destroyed it in our own ways. Some mistakes, once made, cannot be undone. Some betrayals leave wounds too deep to heal. I expected to feel anger. Maybe even sadness. But all I felt was emptiness. Dior left without a word. He didn't look at me when he packed his bags. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just moved around the house like I wasn't there, stuffing his life into suitcases as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. I wanted to say something, to beg him to stay, to tell him that no matter what had happened, I was still his mother. But the words stuck in my throat, choking me. What could I say that he would believe? What comfort could I offer him when I was the reason his world had fallen apart? Mitchell picked him up that evening. He didn't come inside. He just waited by the car while Dior walked out of the house, not sparing me a single glance. He got in, shut the door, and that was it. My son was gone. The silence in the house that night was different. Before, it had been heavy with tension. Now, it was just hollow. Like the walls had swallowed every last piece of life that had once existed here. I sat in the dark for hours, staring at the front door, hoping it would open. It didn't. The days blurred together after that. I stopped keeping track. Morning turned into night, but it all felt the same. I barely ate. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on Mitchell's face that night. I heard the silence when Dior walked out of the house. The shame sat heavy on my chest, suffocating me. I tried to distract myself, cleaning, watching TV, scrolling through my phone. Nothing worked. My mind refused to let me escape. It replayed everything, over and over, like a film I was being forced to watch. Every moment. Every mistake. Every single choice that led me here. I started questioning everything. Was this always meant to happen? Had I been doomed from the start? Was I just repeating the patterns I had learned as a child? Had I ever really escaped my past, or had I just been running from it? I thought back to when I was young. To the things I never spoke about. To the things I convinced myself were normal. I had buried those memories so deep that I had almost forgotten they existed. But now, they clawed their way back to the surface, refusing to be ignored any longer. Maybe this was always inside me. Maybe it was only a matter of time before it surfaced. Or maybe I had been broken long before any of this began. I couldn't live like this. I knew that much. I couldn't keep suffocating under the weight of my own mind. I needed to understand. I needed answers. So, for the first time in my life, I reached out for help. King Kirk was a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. His name had come up in an article I had read months ago, back when I was still pretending everything was fine. Back when I didn't think I needed help. Now, he was the only person I could think of who might be able to make sense of the mess I had made. I stared at my phone for hours before dialing the number. My hand shook as I typed it in. The line rang twice before someone picked up. A calm voice answered, asking how they could help. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, my breath caught. I almost hung up. But then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I told the truth. I think I ruined my life, I whispered. And I don't know how to fix it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, the voice spoke again. Gentle. Steady. Not judging. Just listening. Let's start from the beginning. There is no redemption without accountability. That's what I've learned. No matter how much I want to rewrite the past, I can't. I made my choices. And now, I have to live with them. But can some sins ever be forgiven? I don't know. I may never know. But I do know this. I don't want to be the person I was anymore. I don't want to keep running from my past, from myself. Maybe it's too late to fix what I've broken. But maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to understand why I broke it in the first place. Maybe that's the only place I can start. Some betrayals are unspeakable. Some lines, once crossed, can never be undone. People like to believe that every mistake can be forgiven. That with enough time, enough apologies, enough regret, the past can be erased. But the truth is, some things change you forever. Some choices leave scars that never fade. I don't expect sympathy. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect understanding. Because, at the end of the day, I did this to myself. I was the one who opened the door. I was the one who let everything slip through the cracks. I made the choices that led me here. And now, I have to live with them. The house is empty now. The silence isn't just something I feel, it's something I have become. There are no more voices. No more laughter. No more footsteps in the hallway. Just me. Just the weight of everything I've lost. Mitchell filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. The papers arrived in the mail, and I signed them without hesitation. There was no point in fighting it. No point in pretending we could fix what was already dead. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't ask if I was okay. And I don't blame him. I wouldn't have answered anyway. Dior hasn't spoken to me since he left. I don't know if he ever will. I don't know if he should. He's better off without me. He deserves better than the mother I was. Maybe, one day, he'll understand why I was the way I was. Maybe he won't. Maybe that's not up to me anymore. So, this is it. The end of the life I knew. The end of the person I used to be. I pack my bag slowly, methodically, like I'm moving in slow motion. I don't own much anymore. Just a few clothes. A few personal things. Everything else, I leave behind. I walk to the front door, standing in the doorway for just a moment. The house feels like a tomb now, filled with ghosts of what used to be. But I can't stay here anymore. I don't belong here. Not in this house. Not in this life. I step outside and start walking. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know if there's anywhere left for me to go. But I keep moving anyway, disappearing into a future that feels as uncertain as everything else. Maybe there's a way back from this. Maybe there isn't. Maybe this is the price I have to pay. I guess time will tell. This is the part where people usually ask for redemption. Where they say they've learned their lesson, that they'll do better, that they'll change. But the truth is, some things don't have a happy ending. Some mistakes don't get tied up in a neat little bow. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the past doesn't define you. What you do next does. And maybe that's the only thing I have left now. Whatever comes next. If this story made you feel something, anger, sadness, frustration, I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced betrayal? Have you ever made a mistake you couldn't take back? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's always more to discuss, more to uncover, more to learn from the choices we make. Thanks for listening.